Little high, it's a little bright, and I should have done this earlier, but I was a little busy. I was a little busy. I'll move that. Oh, that's much better there. Okay. There we go. Hello, darlings. Welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. Make certain to hit the like and subscribe button. Ring that notification bell so that you can be updated on videos like this and many others. I am so glad to have you here. I am so thrilled that you are with me today. I know there's only a few of you in the chat room, but that's okay. I hope you are enjoying the series. We are doing Murder on the Orient Express. It is not quite a Victorian novel. In fact, it's not a Victorian novel. It's Agatha Christie, and if memory serves, it's early 30s, I think 1932. I don't really remember. I think the copyright law says that it is supposed to be 100 years old, but I am not there with it yet, so that's okay. We'll just enjoy a good book. That's what we're going to do. So many of you have seen that I'm liquidating some of the things that I currently possess. So many of you who have seen Ghost Adventures, many of you have seen, there's something there on the screen, that's strange. Oh, it's all over. I don't know, there's a lot of energy here. Anyway.
Here.
Huh?
It looks perfect.
Oh, does it? Okay, she says it's clear there, but there's fuzzies here and there's fuzzies here. I don't know, maybe, is it the battery? No, that doesn't do anything. Anyway, yeah, okay, well, so everything is fine, everything is perfect, I'm perfectly happy. I am just ready I'm ready for a new chapter. I am still going to be doing The Gentleman Psychic. I am still going to be doing these videos that you love so much, that I love so much. I am still going to be doing those things. I don't know, though, if I just feel like change is coming, and change is good. Change can be incredibly scary. Change can sometimes, for instance, oftentimes in a political spectrum, when there's an officer or a politician who runs for a high office, the markets will oftentimes go in flux because they don't know and they don't like the change, and that's based on people. So change can be scary, but change is ultimately very good. We are in a new year. We are in a new realm of existence. We are going into the age of Aquarius. We still have to slough off all of that negative energy that we had to deal with. We have to sort of sort of clean it all up. Oh yes, Malika was watching the Cecil Hotel. It is a very freaky place. I was there one time for a filming location, and I did have an encounter with Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. I saw him. Anyway. So, yes, there is no concern, there is no worry. Don't you worry about me. Don't you worry about Lady Alexandra. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Don't worry, okay? And now that we've put all of those fears aside, also don't worry about my boys. My boys are not for sale. The chair is not for sale. I'm not for sale. Well, maybe. Maybe. How much you gonna give? Anyway.
They can rent you.
All right, darlings. Now that we have a few people here in the chats, I'll go ahead and read. Yeah, well, it's been shared. I should have shared it earlier. I didn't, but share it now if you like. That would be terrific if you would. Anyway, here we go. Chapter 6. A woman First of all, said Perrault, I should like a word or two with young M. McQueen. He may be able to give us a valuable information. Certainly, said Monsieur Buch. He turned to the chef de train. Get Monsieur McQueen to come here. The chef de train left the carriage. The conductor returned with a bundle of passports and tickets. Monsieur Buch took them from him. Thank you, Michael. It would be best now, I think, if you were to go back to your post. We will take your evidence formally later. Very good, monsieur. Michael, in his turn, left the carriage. After we have seen young McQueen, said Perrault, perhaps Monsieur le Docteur will come with me to the dead man's carriage. Certainly. After we have finished there... But at this moment, the chef de train returned with Hector McQueen. Monsieur Buch rose. We are a little cramped here, he said pleasantly. Take my seat, Monsieur McQueen. Monsieur Perrault will sit opposite you. So he turned to the chef de train. Clear all the people out of the restaurant car, he said, and let it be left free for Monsieur Perrault. You will conduct your interviews there, mon cher. It would be the most convenient, yes, agreed Perrault. McQueen had stood looking from one to the other, not quite following the rapid flow of French. C'est ce qu'il y a, he began laboriously. Pourquoi? With a vigorous gesture, Perrault motioned him to the seat in the corner. He took it and began once more. Pourquoi? Then, checking himself and relapsing into his own tongue, what's up on the train? Has anything happened? He looked from one man to the other. Perrault nodded. Exactly. Something has happened. Prepare yourself for a shock. Your employer, Monsieur Rachet, is dead. McQueen's mouth pursed itself in a whistle, except that his eyes grew a shade brighter. He showed no signs of shock or distress. So, they got him after all, he said. What exactly do you mean by that phrase, Monsieur McQueen? McQueen hesitated. You are assuming, said Perrault, that Monsieur Rachet was murdered. Wasn't he? This time McQueen did show surprise. Why, yes, he said slowly. That's just what I did think. Do you mean he just died in his sleep? Why, the old man was as tough as... He stopped, at a loss for a smile. No, said Perrault. Your assumption was quite right. Monsieur Rachet was murdered, stabbed, but I should like to know why you were so sure it was murder and not just death. McQueen hesitated. I must get this clear, he said. Who exactly are you, and where do you come in? I represent Compagnie Internationale de Dragons. He paused, then added, I am a detective. My name is Hercule Poirot. If he expected an effect, he did not get one. McQueen said merely, Oh, yes? And waited for him to go on. You know the name, perhaps. Why, it does seem kind of familiar, only I always thought it was a woman's dressmaker. Hercule Poirot looked at him with distaste. It is incredible, he said. What is incredible? Nothing. Let us advance with the matter in hand. I want you to tell me, Monsieur McQueen, all that you know about the dead man. You are not related to him? No, was his secretary. For how long have you held that post? Just over a year. Please give me all the information you can. Well, I met Mr. Ratchet just over a year ago when I was in Persia. Perrault interrupted. What were you doing there? I had come over from New York to look into an oil concession. I don't suppose you want to hear all about that. My friends and I let had been let in rather badly over it. Mr. Ratchet was in the same hotel. He had just had a row with his secretary. He offered me the job, and I took it. I was at the loose end and glad to find a well-paid job, ready-made as it were. And since then, we traveled about. Mr. Ratchet wanted to see the world. He was hampered by knowing no languages. I acted more as a courier than as a secretary. It was a pleasant life. Now tell me as much as you can about your employer. The young man shrugged his shoulders. A perplexed expression passed over his face. That's not so easy. What was his full name? Samuel Edward Ratchet. He was an American citizen? Yes. What part of America did he come from? I don't know. Well, tell me what you do know. The actual truth is, Mr. Perot, that I know nothing at all. Mr. Ratchet never spoke of himself, of his life in America. Why do you think that was? I don't know. I imagined that he might have been ashamed of his beginnings. Some men are. Does that strike you as a satisfactory solution? Frankly, it doesn't. Has he any relations? He never mentioned any. Perot pressed the point. You must have formed some theory, Monsieur McQueen. Well, yes, I did, for one thing. I don't believe Ratchet was his real name. I think he left America definitely in order to escape someone or something. I think he was unsuccessful until a few weeks ago. Or I think he was successful until a few weeks ago. And then? He began to get letters, threatening letters. Did you see them? Yes, it was my business to attend to his correspondence. The first letter came a fortnight ago. Were these letters destroyed? No, I think I've got a couple still in my files. One I know Ratchet tore up in rage. Shall I get them for you? If you would be so good. McQueen left the compartment. He returned a few minutes later and laid down 2 sheets of rather dirty notepaper before Perot. The first letter ran as follows. Thought you'd double-cross us and get away with it, did you? Not on your life. We're out to get you, Ratchet, and we will get you. There was no signature. With no comment beyond raised eyebrows, Perot picked up the second letter. We're going to take you for a ride, Ratchet. Sometime soon, we're going to get you. See? Perot laid the letter down. The style is monotonous, he said. More so than the handwriting. McQueen stared at him. You would not observe, said Perot pleasantly. It requires the eye of one used to such things. This letter was not written by one person, Monsieur McQueen. 2 or 3 or more persons wrote it, each writing a letter or of a word at a time. Also, the letters are printed. That makes the task of identifying the handwriting much more difficult. He paused, then said, Did you know that Monsieur Ratchet had applied for help to me? To you? McQueen's astonished tone told Perot quite certainly that the young man had not known of it. He nodded. Yes, he was alarmed. Tell me, how did he act when he received the first letter? McQueen hesitated. It was difficult to say. He passed it off with a laugh in that quiet way of his, but somehow, he gave a slight shiver, I felt there was a good deal going on underneath the quietness. Perot nodded. Then he asked an unexpected question. Monsieur McQueen, will you tell me, quite honestly, exactly how you regarded your employer? Did you like him? Hector McQueen took a moment or two before replying. No, he said at last. I did not. Why, monsieur? I can't exactly say. He's always quite pleasant in his manner. He paused, then said, I'll tell you the truth, Monsieur Pirot. I disliked and distrusted him. He was, I'm sure, a cruel and dangerous man, I must admit, though that I have no reasons to advance my opinion. Thank you, Monsieur McQueen. One further question. When did you last see Monsieur Ratchet alive? Last evening. He thought for a minute. 10 o'clock, I should say. I went into his compartment to take down some memoranda for him. On what subject? Some tiles and antique pottery he had bought in Persia. What was delivered was not what he had purchased. There's been a long vexations correspondence on the subject. And what was the last time Monsieur Ratchet was seen alive? Oh, and that was the last time Monsieur Ratchet was seen alive? Yes, I suppose so. Do you know when Monsieur Ratchet received the last threatening letter? On the morning of the day we left Constantinople. There is one more question I must ask you, Monsieur McQueen. Were you on good terms with your employer? The young man's eyes twinkled suddenly. This is where I'm supposed to go all goose-fleshy down the back. In words of a bestseller, you've nothing on me. Ratchet and I were on perfectly good terms. Perhaps, Monsieur McQueen, you will give me your full name and your address in America. McQueen gave his name. Hector Willard McQueen, and an address in New York. Pirot leaned back against the cushions. That is all for the present, Monsieur McQueen, he said. I should be obliged if you would keep the matter of Monsieur Ratchet's death to yourself for a little time. His valet masterman will have to know. He probably knows already, said Pirot dryly. If so, try to get him to hold his tongue. That oughtn't to be too difficult. He's a Britisher, and does what he calls keeps to himself. To himself. He's a low opinion of Americans, and no opinion at all of any other nationality. Thank you, Monsieur McQueen. The American left the carriage. Well, demanded Monsieur Bouc. You believe what he says, this young man? He seems honest and straightforward. He did not pretend to any affection for his employer, as he probably would have done had he been involved in any way. It is true, Monsieur Ratchet did not tell him that he had tried to enlist my services and failed, but I did not think that it's really suspicious circumstance. I fancy Monsieur Ratchet was a gentleman who kept his own counsel on every possible occasion. So, you pronounce one person at least innocent of the crime, said Monsieur Bouc jovially. Pirot cast on him a look of reproach. Me? No. I suspect everybody till the last minute, he said. All the same, I must admit that I cannot see this sober, long-headed McQueen losing his head and stabbing his victim 12 or 14 times. It is not in accord with his psychology. No, not at all. No, said Monsieur Bouc thoughtfully. That is the act of a man driven almost crazy with a frenzied hate. It suggests more the Latin temperament, or else it suggests, as our friend, the chef de train, insisted, a woman. Chapter 7. The Body. Followed by Dr. Constantine, Pirot made his way to the next couch and the compartment occupied by the murdered man. The conductor came and unlocked the door for them with his key. The two men passed inside. Pirot turned inquiringly to his companion. How much has been disarranged in this compartment? Nothing has been touched. I was careful not to move the body in making my examination. Pirot nodded. He looked round him. The first thing that struck the senses was the intense cold. The window was pushed down as far as it would go, and the blind was drawn up. "Ooh," observed Pirot. The other smiled appreciatively. I did not like to close it, he said. Pirot examined the window carefully. You are right, he announced. Nobody left the carriage this way. Possibly the open window was intended to suggest the fact, but if so, the snow has defeated the murderer's object. He examined the frame of the window carefully. Taking a small case from his pocket, he blew a little powder over it. No fingerprints at all, he said. That means it has been wiped. Well, if there had been fingerprints, it would have told us very little. They would have been those of Mr. Ratchet, or his valet, or the conductor. Criminals do not make mistakes of that kind nowadays. And that being so, he added cheerfully, we might as well shut the window. Positively, it is the cold storage in here. He suited the action to the word and then turned his attention for the first time to the motionless figure lying in the bunk. Ratchet lay on his back, with his pajama jacket stained with rusty patches and had been unbuttoned and thrown back. I had to see the nature of the wounds, you see, explained the doctor. Poirot nodded. He bent over the body. Finally, he straightened himself with a slight grimace. It's not pretty, he said. Someone must have stood there and stabbed him again and again. How many wounds are there exactly? I make it 12. 1 or 2 are slight as to be practically scratches. On the other hand, at least 3 would be capable of causing death. Something in the doctor's tone caught Poirot's attention. He looked at him sharply. A little Greek was standing staring down at the body with a puzzled frown. Something strikes you as odd, does it not? He asked gently. Speak, my friend. There is something here that puzzles you. You are right, acknowledged the other. What is it? You see these 2 wounds, and here, he pointed. They are deep. Each cut must have severed blood vessels, and yet the edges do not gape and have not bled as one would have expected, which suggests that the man was already dead, some little time dead, when they were delivered, but that is surely absurd. It would seem so, said Poirot thoughtfully, unless our murderer figured to himself that he had not accomplished his job properly and came back to make quite sure. But that is manifestly absurd. Anything else? Well, just one thing. And that? You see this wound here, under the right arm, near the right shoulder? Take this pencil of mine. Could you deliver such a blow? Poirot raised his hand. Précisément, he said. I see. With a right hand, it is exceedingly difficult, almost impossible. One would have to strike backhanded, as it were. But if the blow were struck with the left hand... Exactly, Monsieur Poirot. That blow was almost certainly struck with the left hand. So that our murderer is left-handed? No, it is more difficult than that, is it not? You say, Monsieur Poirot, some of these other blows are just as obviously right-handed. 2 people. We are back to 2 people again, murmured the detective. He asked abruptly, was the electric light on? It is difficult to say. We see it was turned off by the conductor every morning about 10 o'clock. The switches will tell us, said Poirot. He examined the switch of the top light and also the rollback bed head light. The former was turned off, the latter was closed. Ah, bien, he said thoughtfully. We have the hypothesis of the first and second murderer, as the great Shakespeare would have put it. The first murderer stabbed his victim and left the compartment, turning off the light. The second murderer came in the dark, did not see that his or her work had been done, and stabbed at least twice at the dead body. Que pensez-vous de ça? Magnificent, said the little doctor with enthusiasm. The other's eyes twinkled. You think so? I am glad. It sounded to me a little like nonsense. What other explanation can there be? That is just what I am asking myself. Have we here a coincidence, or what? Are there any other inconsistencies, such as would point to people being concerned? I think I can say, yes, some of these blows, as I have already said, point to a weakness, a lack of strength, or a lack of determination. They are feeble, glancing blows, but this one here, and this one, again he pointed, great strength was needed for those blows. They have penetrated the muscle. They were, in your opinion, delivered by a man? Most certainly. They could not have been delivered by a woman? A young, vigorous, athletic woman might have struck them, especially if she were in the grip of a strong emotion, but it is, in my opinion, highly unlikely. Poirot was silent a moment or two. The other said anxiously, "You understand my point." "Perfectly," said Poirot. "The matter begins to clear itself up wonderfully. The murderer is a man of great strength. He was feeble. It was a woman. It was right-handed person. It was a left-handed person. Ah, c'est rigolo, trop ça." He spoke with sudden anger. "And the victim, what does he do in all of this? Does he cry out? Does he struggle? Does he defend himself?" He slipped his hand under the pillow and drew out the automatic pistol which Ratchet had shown him the day before. "Fully loaded, you see," he said. They looked round them. Ratchet's day clothing was hanging from the hooks in the wall. On the small table formed by the lid of the washing basin were various objects: false teeth and a glass of water, another glass, empty, a bottle of mineral water, a large flask, and an ashtray containing the butt of a cigar, and some charred fragments of paper. Also, 2 burnt matches. The doctor picked up the empty glass and sniffed it. "Here is the explanation of the victim's inertia," he said quietly. "Drugged." "Yes." Poirot nodded. He picked up the 2 matches and scrutinized them carefully. "You have a clue, then?" demanded the little doctor eagerly. "Those 2 matches are of a different shape," said Poirot. "One is flatter than the other, you see." "It is the kind you get on the train," said the doctor, "in paper covers." Poirot was feeling in the pockets of Ratchet's clothing. Presently, he pulled out a box of matches. He compared them carefully. "The rounder one is a match struck by Monsieur Ratchet," he said. "Let us see here if he had also the flatter kind." But a further search showed no other matches. Poirot's eyes darting about the compartment. They were bright and sharp like a bird's. One felt that nothing could escape their scrutiny. With a little exclamation, he bent and picked up something from the floor. It was a small square of cambric, very dainty. Our friend, the chef de train, was right. There was a woman concerned in this. "And most conveniently, she leaves her handkerchief behind," said Poirot. "Exactly as it happens in the books and on the films, and to make things even easier for us, it is marked with an initial." "What a stroke of luck!" exclaimed the doctor. "Is it not?" said Poirot. Something in his tone surprised the doctor, but before he could ask for elucidation, Poirot had made another dive on the floor. This time he held out on the palm of his hand a pipe cleaner. "It is perhaps the property of Monsieur Ratchet," suggested the doctor. "There is no pipe in any of his pockets, and no tobacco or tobacco pouch." "Then it's a clue." "Oh, decidedly, and again dropped most conveniently. A masculine clue this time, you note. One cannot complain of having no clues in this case. There are clues here in abundance. By the way, what have you done with the weapon?" "There was no sign of any weapon. The murderer must have taken it away with him." I wonder why," mused Poirot. "Ah," the doctor said. The doctor had been delicately exploring the pajama pockets of the dead man. "I overlooked this," he said. "I unbuttoned the jacket and threw it straight back. From the breast pocket, he brought out a gold watch. The case was dented savagely, and the hands pointed to 1:15. "You see," cried Constantine eagerly, "this gives us the hour of the crime. It agrees with my calculations. Between midnight and 2 in the morning, it was what I said. And probably about 1 o'clock, though it is difficult to be exact in these matters. Ah, bien. Here is confirmation. 1:15. That was the hour of the crime." "It is possible. Yes, it is certainly possible." The doctor looked at him curiously. "You will pardon me, Mr. Poirot, but I do not quite understand you." "I do not understand myself," said Poirot. "I understand nothing at all, and, as you perceive, it worries me." He sighed and bent over the little table, examining the charred fragment of the paper. He murmured to himself, "What I need at this moment is an old-fashioned woman's hat box. Dr. Constantine was at a loss to know what to make of this singular remark in any case. Poirot gave him no time for questions. Opening the door into the corridor, he called for the conductor. The man arrived at a run. "How many women are there in this coach?" The conductor counted on his fingers. 1, 2, 3, 6, monsieur. The old American lady, the Swedish lady, the young English lady, the Countess Adrenai, and Madame la Princesse de Dragmerov, he said. Poirot considered. "They all have hat boxes? Oui? Oui, monsieur." "Then bring me, let me see, yes, the Swedish lady's and that of the lady's maid. Those two are the only hope. You will tell them it is a customs regulation, anything that occurs to you." "That will be quite right, monsieur. Neither lady is in her compartment at the moment." "Then be quick." The conductor departed. He returned with 2 hat boxes. Poirot opened that of lady's maid and tossed it aside. Then he opened the Swedish lady's and uttered an exclamation of satisfaction. Removing the hats carefully, he disclosed round humps of wire netting. "Ah, here is what we need. About 15 years ago, hat boxes were made like this. You skewered through the hat with the hat pin onto this hump of wire netting." As he spoke, he was skillfully removing 2 of the attachments. Then he repacked the hat box and told the conductor to return them both where they belonged. When the door was shut once more, he turned to his companion. "See you, my dear doctor? Me, I am not one to rely on the expert procedure. It is the psychology I seek, not the fingerprint or the cigarette ash, but in this case I would welcome a little scientific assistance. This compartment is full of clues, but can I be sure that those clues are really what they seem to be?" "I'm afraid I do not quite understand you, Monsieur Poirot." "Well, to give you an example. We found a woman's handkerchief. Did a woman drop it, or did a man committing the crime say to himself, 'I will make this look like a woman's crime. I will stab my enemy a necessary number of times, making some of the blows feeble and ineffective, and I will drop this handkerchief where no one can miss it.' That is one possibility. Then there is another. Did a woman kill him, and did she deliberately drop a pipe cleaner to make it look like a man's work? Or are we seriously to suppose that 2 people, a man and a woman, were separately concerned, and that each was so careless as to drop a clue to their identity? It is a little too much of a coincidence, that." "But where does the hat box come in?" asked the doctor, still puzzled. "Ah, I am coming to that. As I say, these clues, the watch stopped at 1:15. The handkerchief, the pipe cleaner, they may be genuine or they may be fake. As to that, I cannot tell. But there is one clue here which I believe, though again I may be wrong, has not been faked. I mean, this flat match, Monsieur le Docteur. I believe that match was used by the murderer, not by Monsieur Ratchet. It was used to burn an incriminating paper of some kind, possibly a note. If so, there is something in that note, some mistake, some error, that left a possible clue to the assailant. I am going to endeavor to resurrect what that something was." He went out of the compartment and returned a few moments later with a small spirit stove and a pair of curling tongs. "I use them for the moustaches," he said, referring to the latter. The doctor watched him with great interest. He flattened out the 2 humps of wire, and with great care wriggled the charred scrap of paper on one of them. He clapped the other on top of it, and then, holding both pieces together with the tongs, held the whole thing over the flame of the spirit lamp. "It is a very makeshift affair, this," he said over his shoulder. "Let us hope that it will answer its purpose." The doctor watched the proceedings attentively. The metal began to glow, and suddenly the faint indications of letters, Words formed themselves slowly, words of fire. It is a very tiny scrap, only 3 words, and part of another showed. Member little Daisy Armstrong. Ah! Pierrot gave a sharp exclamation. It tells you something? Asked the doctor. Pierrot's eyes were shining. He laid down the tongs carefully. Yes, he said. I know the dead man's real name. I know why he had to leave America. What was his name? Cassetti. Cassetti? Constantine knitted his brows. It brings me back to something some years ago. I cannot remember. It was a case in America, was it not? Yes, said Pierrot. A case in America. Further than Pierrot was not disposed to be communicative, he looked round him as he went on. He will go into all that presently. Let us first make sure that we have seen all there is to be seen. Quickly and deftly, he went once more through the pockets of the dead man's clothes, but found nothing there of interest. He tried the communicating door, which led through to the next compartment, but it was bolted on the other side. There is one thing I do not understand, said Dr. Constantine. If the murderer did not escape through the window, and if this communicating door was bolted on the other side, and if the door into the corridor was not only locked on the inside, but chained, how then did the murderer leave the compartment? That is what the audience says when a person bound hand and foot is shut into a cabinet and disappears. You mean? I mean, explained Pierrot, that if the murderer intended us to believe that he had escaped by way of window, he would naturally make it appear that the other 2 exits were impossible. Like the disappearing person in the cabinet, it is a trick. It is our business to find out how the trick is done. He locked the communicating door on the other side. In case, he said, the excellent Mrs. Hubbard should take it into her head to acquire first-hand details of crime to write to her daughter. He looked round once more. There is nothing more to do here, I think. Let us rejoin Monsieur Bouc. Chapter 8. The Armstrong kidnapping case. They found Monsieur Bouc finishing an omelette. I thought it best to have lunch served immediately in the restaurant car, he said. Afterwards, it will be cleared by Monsieur Pierrot can conduct his examination of the passengers there. In the meantime, I have ordered them to bring us three some food here. Ah, an excellent idea, said Monsieur Pierrot. Neither of the other 2 men was hungry, and the meal was soon eaten, but not till they were sipping their coffee did Monsieur Bouc mention the subject that was occupying all of their minds. Eh bien, he said. Eh bien? I have discovered the identity of the victim. I know why it was imperative he should have to leave America. Who was he? Do you remember of the Armstrong baby? This is the man who murdered little Daisy Armstrong, Cassetti. Ah, yes, I recall it. A shocking affair, though I cannot remember the details. Colonel Armstrong was an Englishman, a V.C. He was half American, as his mother was the daughter of W.K. Vanderholt, the Wall Street millionaire. He married the daughter of Linda Arden, the most famous tragic American actress of her day. They lived in America and had 1 child, a girl, whom they idolized. When she was 3 years old, she was kidnapped, and an impossibly high sum demanded as the price of her return. I will not weary you with all of the intricacies that followed. I will come to the moment when, after having paid over an enormous sum of $200,000, the child's dead body was discovered, it having been dead at least a fortnight. Public indignation rose to a fever point, and there was worse to follow. Mrs. Armstrong was expecting another child. Following the shock of discovery, she gave birth to a dead child born prematurely, and herself died. Her broken-hearted husband shot himself. Mon Dieu, what a tragedy, I remember now, said Monsieur Bouc. There was also another death, if I remember rightly. Oui, an unfortunate French or Swiss nursemaid. The police were convinced that she had some knowledge of the crime. They refused to believe her hysterical denials. Finally, in a fit of despair, poor girl threw herself from a window and was killed. It was proved afterward that she was absolutely innocent of any complicity in the crime. It's not good to think of, said Monsieur Bouc. About 6 months later, this man Cassetti was arrested as the head of the gang who had kidnapped the child. They had used the same methods in the past. If the police seemed likely to get their trail, they had killed their prisoner, hidden the body, and continued to extract as much money as possible before the crime was discovered. Now, I will make clear for you this, my friend. Cassetti was the man, but by means of the enormous wealth he had piled up and by the secret hold he had over various persons, he was acquitted on some technical inaccuracy. Notwithstanding that, he would have been lynched by the populace had he not been clever enough to give them the slip. It is now clear to me what happened. He changed his name and left America. Since then, he has been a gentleman of leisure, traveling abroad and living on his renette. Ah, quel animal! Monsieur Bouc's tone was redolent of heartfelt disgust. I cannot regret that he is dead, not at all. I agree with you. Tout de même, it is not necessary that he should be killed on the Orient Express. There are other places. Pierrot smiled a little. He realized that Monsieur Bouc was biased in the matter. The question we have now is to ask ourselves is this, he said. Is this murder, this murder of the work of some rival gang from whom Cassetti had double-crossed in the past, or is it an act of private vengeance? He explained his discovery of the few words of the charred fragment of paper. If I am right in my assumption, then the letter was burnt by the murderer. Why? Because it mentions the word Armstrong, which is the clue to the mystery. And are there members of any Armstrong family living? That, unfortunately, I do not know. I think I remember reading of a younger sister, Mrs. Armstrong's. Pierrot went on to relate the joint conclusions of himself and Dr. Constantine. Mr. Bouc brightened at the mention of the broken watch. That seems to give us the time of the crime very exactly. Yes, said Pierrot. It is very convenient. There was an indescribable something in his tone that made both the other two look at him curiously. You say that yourself you heard Ratchet speak to the conductor at 20 minutes to 1. Pierrot related just what had occurred. Well, said Monsieur Bouc, that proves at least that Cassetti, or Ratchet, as I shall continue to call him, was certainly alive at 20 minutes to 1. 23 minutes to 1, to be precise. Then at 12:37, to put it formally, Monsieur Ratchet was alive. That is one fact at least. Pierrot did not reply. He sat looking thoughtfully in front of him. There was a tap on the door, and a restaurant attendant entered. The restaurant car is free now, monsieur, he said. We will go there, said Monsieur Bouc, rising. I may accompany you? Asked Constantine. Certainly, my dear doctor, unless Monsieur Pierrot has any objection. No, not at all, not at all, said Pierrot. After a little politeness in the matter of procedure, après vous, monsieur, mais non après vous, they left the compartment. Part 2. The Evidence. Chapter 1. The evidence of the wagon-lit conductor. In the restaurant car, all was in readiness. Pierrot and Monsieur Bouc sat together on one side of the table. The doctor sat across the aisle. On the table in front of Pierrot was a plan of the Istanbul Calatus coach with the names of the passengers marked in red ink. The passports and tickets were in a pile at one side. There was a writing paper, ink, pen, and pencils. Excellent, said Pierrot. We can open our court of inquiry without more ado. First, I think we should take the evidence of the wagon-lit conductor. You probably know something about the man. The character has he? Or what character has he? Is he a man in whose word you would place reliance? I should say so, most assuredly. Pierre Michel has been employed by my company for over 15 years. He is a Frenchman, lives near Calais, thoroughly respectable and honest, not perhaps remarkable for brains. Perrault nodded comprehendingly. Good, he said. Let us see him. Pierre Michel, had recovered some of his assurance, and he was still extremely nervous. I hope, monsieur, will not think that there has been any negligence on my part, he said anxiously, his eyes going from Perrault to Monsieur Bourg. It is a terrible thing that has happened. I hope monsieur does not think that it reflects on me in any way. Having soothed the man's fears, Perrault began his questions. He first elicited Michael's name and address, his length of service, and the length of time he had been on this particular route. These particulars he already knew, but the routine questions served to put the man at ease. And now, went on Perrault, let us come to the events of last night. Monsieur Ratchet retired to bed when? Almost immediately after dinner, monsieur. Actually, before we left Belgrade. So he did on the previous night. He had directed me to make up the bed while he was at dinner, and I did so. Did anybody go into his compartment afterwards? His valet, monsieur, the young American gentleman, his secretary. Anyone else? No, monsieur, not that I know of. Good. And that is the last you saw or heard of him? No, monsieur. You forget he rang his bell about 20 to 1, soon after we had stopped. What happened exactly? I knocked on the door, but he called out and said he had made a mistake. In English or in French? In French, monsieur. What were his words exactly? Ce n'est in the end, je me se trompe. Ah, quite right, said Perrault. That is what I heard. And then you went away. Oui, monsieur. Did you go back to your seat? No, monsieur. I went first to answer another bell that had just rung. No. Michel, I'm going to ask you an important question. Where were you at 1:15? I, monsieur? I was at my little seat at the end, facing up the corridor. You are sure? Moi aussi, at least. Yes. I went into the coach, the Athens coach, to speak to my colleague there. We spoke about the snow. That was sometime soon after 1 o'clock. I cannot say exactly. And you returned when? One of my bells rang, monsieur. I remember I told you it was the American lady. She had rung several times. Ah, I recollect, said Perrault. And after that? After that, monsieur, I answered your bell and brought you some mineral water. Then about half an hour later, I made up the bed in one of the other compartments. That of young American gentleman, Mr. Ratchet's secretary. Was Monsieur McQueen alone in his compartment when you went to make up the bed? The English colonel, number 15, was with him. They had been sitting talking. What did the colonel do when he left Monsieur McQueen? He went back to his own compartment, number 15. That is quite close to your seat, is it not? Yes, monsieur. It is second compartment from the end of the corridor. His bed was already made up? Yes, monsieur. I made it up while he was at dinner. What time was all this? I could not say exactly, monsieur. Not later than 2 o'clock, certainly. And after that? After that, monsieur, I sat with my seat till morning. You did not go again into the Athens coach? No, monsieur. Perhaps you slept. I do not think so, monsieur. The train being at a standstill prevented me from dozing off as I usually do. Did you see any of the passengers moving up or down the corridor? The man reflected. One of the ladies went to the toilet at the far end, I think. Which lady? I do not know, monsieur. It was far down the corridor, and she had her back to me. She had on a kimono of scarlet with dragons on it. Perrault nodded. And after that? Nothing, monsieur, until the morning. There we go. Back on. Did you have something you need to say?
Red kimono, I think is about where we were. The conductor saying he saw the red kimono.
Passengers, let's see, red kimono.
Still
Um,
not on for me.
well, it's back on there. It says it's back on. You might have to refresh. I don't know.
Okay, seems like you're up.
Did you see any of the passengers moving up or down the corridor? The man reflected. One of the ladies went to the toilet at the far end, I think. Which lady? I do not know, monsieur. It was far down the corridor, and she had on her back to me. She had on a kimono of scarlet with dragons on it. Perrault nodded. And after that? Nothing, monsieur, until the morning. Are you sure? Oh, pardon, you yourself, monsieur, opened your door and looked out for a second. Good, my friend, said Perrault. I wondered whether you would remember that. By the way, I was awakened by what sounded like something heavy falling against my door. Have you any idea what that could have been? The man stared at him. No, there is nothing, monsieur, nothing. I am positive of it. Then I must have the cauchemar, said Perrault philosophically. Unless, said Monsieur Bouc, it was something in the compartment next door that you heard. Perrault took no notice of the suggestion. Perhaps he did not wish it to before the wagon lit conductor. Let us pass to another point, he said. Supposing that last night an assassin joined the train, it is quite certain that he could not have left it after committing the crime? Pierre Michel shook his head. Nor that he could be concealed on it somewhere? It has been well searched, said Mr. Bouc. Abandon the idea, my friend. Besides, said Michel, no one could get on to the sleeping car without my seeing them. When was the last stop? Vinkovy. What time was that? We should have left there by 11:58, but owing to the weather, we were 20 minutes late. Someone might have come along from the ordinary part of the train? No, monsieur. After the service of dinner, the door between the ordinary carriages and the sleeping cars is locked. Did you yourself descend from the train at Vinkovy? Oui, monsieur. I got down onto the platform as usual and stood by the step up to into the train. The other conductors did the same. What about the forward door? The one near the restaurant car? It is always fastened on the inside. It is not fastened now. The man looked surprised, then his face cleared. Doubtless one of the passengers has opened it to look out on the snow, probably. Probably, said Perrault. He tapped thoughtfully on the table for a minute or two. Monsieur does not blame me, said the man timidly. Perrault smiled on him kindly. You have had the evil chance, my friend. One other point, while I remember it. You said that another bell rang just as you were knocking at Monsieur Ratchet's door. In fact, I heard it myself. Whose was it? It was the bell of Madame la Princesse Dragminoff. She desired me to summon her maid. And you did? Oui, monsieur. Perrault studied the plan in front of him thoughtfully. Then he inclined his head. That is all, he said, for the moment. Thank you, merci, monsieur. The man rose. He looked at Monsieur Bouc. Do not distress yourself, said the latter kindly. I cannot see that there has been any negligence on your part. Gratified, Pierre Michel left the compartment. I think that is where we end for the evening. We'll go on to the evidence of the secretary next time. Thank you for all of your likes, your comments, your shares. Thank you for being here to listen to Murder on the Orient Express. Make certain that you find me on thegentlemanpsychic.com. Send me some DMs. Tell me what you like if you're in Southern California, what things you may find fascinating. Comment on the video, why not? You can also find me on patreon.com / The Gentleman's House. Link is in the comment section. You can find me on PayPal, Venmo, all there. If you should like to continue to support the channel, if you are new and would like to join my other patrons, I would appreciate it greatly. Many adventures ahead, my friends, many adventures ahead, both in the book and in our lives. I appreciate you. Thank you, lovelies. Have a good night.